And welcome to another episode of Experts Speak. I'm Michael DeLon. Today I am talking with Kira Shishkin. Kira, man, thanks for being here today.
Michael, thank you so much for welcoming me on your show. It's a real pleasure. I'm excited for this chat.
Yeah, I am too. And listeners, you are going to be excited as well when you find out what Kira has created and how you can get news on your phone by text so you can read less and know more. I'm super excited about this. Um, Kira has put this here. Wow, he's super accomplished in such a short time in life. You've done a ton of things, but you have created this new way for people to stay up to date on life, what's going on in the world, and I want to talk about that. So as we do that, let me ask you, how in the world did you get doing what you're doing today?
Totally. I think it's a big question, really loaded question. I think for me, it's a combination of like two big threads of my life that have intertwined to kind of wake up this, entrepreneurial spirit, but also in the direction of what I'm doing with informed.now. And I would say the thread number one is the fact that I just really grew up around the world. Not really to like any credit of my own, but as a kid, I went through some experiences that forced a move in my family. And so I was born and raised and spent my childhood in Ukraine, in the
Okay.
capital of Ukraine, Kiev. And when I was really young, just kind of like finishing up my childhood, going into my teens, I had to move to Israel for medical reasons. And so then I arrived in Israel, it's an entirely different continent, entirely different culture, entirely different everything, and it was like a huge shift. And it's also going from two loudest conflicts in the world today. Then I made the switch, as I finished kind of like my teenagehood, young adulthood. I came as an adult to the United States. Saw the civil war that's unfolding in the States, and I've just sort of seen the importance of having the facts, understanding the world around you, and having your own opinion on things that isn't dictated by media or by government propaganda. It's really important. So that's thread number one, is like the sense of being a global citizen, someone who identifies being a global citizen,
Yeah.
and that sort of importance that I place on feeling informed about the world around me. The second thread is that experience that I hinted at earlier of moving from Ukraine to Israel for medical reasons. There was a point in my life where I was deeply physically and mentally disabled, right? And I look back at that time, it was multiple years of really serious trauma. To sum it up, I lost control of my attention. I couldn't learn, I couldn't remember things, and I couldn't focus. Like I couldn't wield the superpower that is a human superpower, is attention. Our ability to focus on things, I think, is one of the most distinguishing features of our species. And having lost that, I really felt like that is it. Like that's the human superpower. And it brought into this thread of like, I want to safeguard attention. I want to empower other people to be able to wield their attention instead of having it robbed from them. And that's sort of like the big thread. And combining this sort of awareness of the world and interest, curiosity for the world that is global, and this like obsession with attention, helping other people regain and wield their attention, came to create informed.now, which is a solution that makes news, and specifically world news, the news that changed the world. That's the scale that we're looking at. So kind of historical news and changes that are shaping the world every day, but doing it in a way that doesn't cost you your attention, doesn't hijack your eyeballs through clickbait, through outrage bait, and keep you hostage for as long as possible. Instead, it empowers you to make up your own mind without being manipulative, influential, or soliciting. And that's sort of the pillars of what I'm doing now, which is a company that I'm actually wearing in one of our shirts,
Yep.
informed.now.
I love it. I love it. So give our audience now, and I love that background, by the way. That's very good background of who you are and why you're doing what you're doing, because it all plays in there. But talk about, okay, informed.now. What is it? Where do I get this information? How does it deliver? And then I've got some other questions, but let's get them in the
Yeah.
context of this thing right now, okay?
Yeah, it's mobilized around the problem that we observe, that I think a lot of people experience and see, and it's what we call the age of misinformation overload. right? We already lived through the age of information overload. Now we're living through the age of misinformation overload,
Love
right?
that.
It's a very post-truth, very post-fact reality that we
Yeah.
occupy. It's definitely the case in the United States, but
Uh,
I also think it's a very global phenomenon. And it's this idea that like reading news is a toxic experience. Like
yeah.
people kind of fall into two camps these days. They either don't read news because it's so difficult, it's so draining, or they read news that mislead them. Because
Right.
most news publications, at least at the retail consumer level, they are propaganda, right? There are various flavors of opinion and sort of commentary that has come to be acknowledged as that's what news is. That's not
Yes.
what news is. That's what news commentary is. And you have to distinguish the two. And so, this observation of the problem that we have in the United States, which I also credit for a lot of the hyperpolarization in this country, social, cultural, political polarization, it's very artificial. We are much more alike than we are, dissimilar, and we are also much more in common than we realize. But the way we read media and the way media is pushed on us creates outrage, anger, fear that spreads us in our camps and tells us these stories, and it makes us these tribal, bipartisan, angry people. And I just
Right.
think the narrative of the news is extremely broken. Now, what's
Yeah.
broken about it? Number one, it is structural sensationalism, right? Sensationalism is empowered by the financial incentives of these companies, which are to hijack your attention and hold your attention hostage because their business is advertisement. It's not
Yeah.
informing you and stepping back, it's hijacking your attention and serving you solicitations, collecting your data, harvesting your cookies, right? It isn't about you. You are the product. You're
Right.
no longer the customer, which is why most people, they don't pay for news.
Right.
It's not because they're free, it's because you're the product of the news industry. You're being sold, your
Yeah.
eyeballs are being sold to the advertiser, right? And that creates clickbait, emotional triggering news. It creates structural sensationalism, dramatization, verbosity. And that's like one pillar of the problem. The second is the outward bias, the opinion, the agenda of these. You read CNN, you read Fox News, they have their own color, their own red, their own purple, their own blue. It's very hard to find your own purple in the middle. And the third, probably the most fundamental, is that news are is an industry fed by advertiser revenue, which means you see ads everywhere. There's a car, the video of a car driving by, then there is a socks, and there's a retirement plan, there's a new investment, there's an advertisement in between paragraphs. Now,
Yeah.
soon there's going to be advertisement in between letters, maybe in between characters, maybe advertisements as punctuation, right? We're getting there. And in a few
Yeah.
years, with AI coming into the picture, it's soon going to be impossible for the everyday person, the everyday Michael, the everyday Kira to read news without a filter. And we
Right.
create that trust layer. We're creating a barrier that puts the reader first, that doesn't disrespect the reader and their time. Instead, it says, we're going to read all the news for you to remove bias, remove solicitation, remove the clickbait, remove all of this noise. So we give you the facts, facts that are changing the world. And then you can verify because we rely on primary sources. We're not reading some creative writer, turned journalist. We're
Right.
reading primary sources. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, central banks of the world, the United Nations, the World Health Organization, CDC, the White House, whatever is the primary source of the news at hand,
Mm-hmm.
that's what we read, and that's what we give you in the most bite-sized version, which is a text.
Yeah, so you're delivering this on this little doohickey thing we call a phone. I'm not sure why we call it a phone because the amount of time we use it as a phone is really little, right? But it's we all carry them, and to have unbiased news, information delivered to me where there's no it's interesting, and I'm going to use a phrase that may be offensive. I hope it's not to you or my listeners, but you were talking about how we are the product of the media. They are, quote,
Hmm.
using us to get the advertisers to pay the bill. And what the
Exactly.
phrase that came to me is, wow, it's legalized human trafficking.
It's harvesting. We're
Oh,
being
it's
harvested.
crazy. Yeah.
Our attention is harvested like a farm, you know?
And people don't understand that. And what you were talking about the media, so many times I've heard people say, "Well, I I get my stuff from Fox. You get yours from CNN." And they go back and forth on where you get your information, but it's all because of the tribe that they are in, not because of the information that is supposed to be portrayed. And what you've done is kind of, dare I say, cut away all the fat, all the bad ingredients. You're delivering up the menu to say, here's the real information. You're
Hmm.
smart enough to discern this and to go do your own research.
Exactly. It's the respect, it's the dignity of I'm not going to treat you like a child.
Yeah.
You know that you want the truth. We'll give you a really concise, professionally researched summary, but if you want to click into learning more, we're not going to take you through some pundit, you know, creative essay. We're going to take you directly to the Supreme Court case, the
Right.
PDF itself. We're going to take you directly to the Bill of Congress, the PDF itself. We're going to take you to the source that a large company like Fox or like CNN will never do. In fact,
Right.
sometimes you read CNBC and they're talking about inflation, and you're like, why don't you ever tell us where you got this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's very simple. It comes from a very specific department, and we go to that link. We have direct hookups to the primary source, and it feels like it's so simple, right? We're just giving you the horse's mouth. We're leading
Right.
you to the horse. It's like, here's the horse that said this. We summarize it for you, but if you want to talk to the horse is right here. None of the big legacy news media respects the reader enough to lead them to the source, which is why there is no links to click into where the mother source is.
Right.
Another angle that I think is very worth mentioning, which you kind of just mentioned, there's this tribalism around, like, you read Fox, I read CNN, whatever. They get their news from the same place.
Right.
They get their news from the wholesale layer, which is what in the industry is called news wire or a news agency. And there's
Mm-hmm.
only really four: Associated Press, not the retail version, but the wire version,
Mm-hmm.
AFP, Reuters, Bloomberg. They are industry leaders who have their own reporting muscle. They actually have boots on the ground in Afghanistan, in Iran, in Ukraine, in Israel, all over at the stock market and in the Chinese exchange. They
Mm-hmm.
have all over the world people on the ground collecting primary evidence and facts, and then they resell it at a wholesale layer to the retailers, right? To the Fox News and
Right.
CNN, and then the retail lever essentially puts their own spin on it, their own agenda, their own advertisement layer, and they sell it to the reader. Well, we said, why don't we democratize the access to the facts and give you the wholesale facts directly to the everyday American? Because you're mature enough, you're an adult enough to be able to get the facts without the noise, without the commentary, without all of that stuff. And I think that's another angle of viewing our work as democratizing access, to the power of the newswire.
Yeah. So you're going. I'm typing this as you're going direct to consumer. Dare I say,
Yes.
right? You're taking the source, and you're cutting out the middleman, and you're bringing
Mm-hmm.
me the data or the resource, and it's unbiased. I don't have to worry about ads, clickbait, all that stuff, because it's coming right from the source, and the value that that brings is inordinate, because now I have the ability to read, to discern, and go, okay, it's not like I can disagree with you. It's new. And
I
you give me
mean,
the right.
we give you the power to
Yeah.
make up your own mind. And traditional legacy news doesn't do that. They tell you what to think, they tell you what to
Yeah.
feel. Associated Press, on the retail level, used to have this reputation of like being one of the most objective sources. And I think Reuters is still pretty good at that.
Yeah.
But Associated Press is no longer. It's when you read it, you can see that the words that they're using are really not very neutral, right? Like, I'm not someone who is endorsing or not endorsing Trump, but when you read Associated Press, you can actually see they are leaning. They're leaning not just center, they're leaning towards a certain direction. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, to me, the loss of Associated Press as a neutral source
Yeah.
was one of the biggest recent losses of the news industry. Right now, the only source that, like, I would say I take very seriously and I think is cream of the crop is Reuters. because
Hmm.
they are somehow still manage to speak neutrally. But every other source, and now included also AP, is talking about news with a charged tone, or one direction or another. They're being selective about the evidence they bring. They're being commentators. And that's just not the role of information. That's the role of entertainment media.
Well,
But
and
if you're in information media, yeah.
I was going to jump in there and say it. A lot of the news media that we take in is entertainment, probably more than information. And you can just see it in the way that the people dress, the people interact, the fun, that's all entertainment. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, that's what we love. That's what we love, right? And what you're doing is cutting through that and saying, here's the information you need to make intelligent decisions on your own,
Exactly.
right?
Hmm. And I feel like there's an important experience that like the person goes through, like even throughout their day. For example, like you show up to work and you're maybe paid to be a smart guy, right? Maybe you're working in an office, maybe working in some sort of a clerical or administrative of managerial function. You're paid to know things, right? You're a knowledge worker, perhaps, right? Maybe you're just someone who like is expected to be current professionally or even socially through your friends or through your
Mm-hmm.
family. And if you show up to this space and people are talking about something and you have no idea what they're saying and you feel isolated and you're very vulnerable to pick up whatever they're saying and say, okay, so that's what's going on. Okay, now I know what's going on.
Yeah.
It's similar. If you remember college, you show up to a class and you didn't do the reading and everyone's talking about the book and you're like, I just need to like pick up what's happening. I need to like tune in. But you
Right.
can't. If you haven't done the reading, you're not going to be able to speak up in that class. You're not going to be
Right.
able to have an opinion. You're not going to be able to have a voice. And it's the perfect analogy for not having a voice, not feeling enfranchised, not feeling like you have you know, a say in the
Right.
state of the world when you don't do your news reading. And so we give you in some ways the confidence to not be swayed by what you hear in a bar, what you hear from your buddies and your friends, what you see on social media and what you see at work. Because when you come into that conversation and you overhear someone talking about Trump, someone talking about tariffs, someone talking about China, you know what the facts are. And
Yeah.
so you have your own ground that you can be comfortable in, and you can hear their perspective, you can engage, but you're no longer vulnerable to
Right.
the like, oh my God, I haven't done the reading, and they have like, what are they saying? I need to tune in. That's also part of the confidence that we're looking to really give to the reader.
Yeah. As you were talking through that, the thought that came to me is sound bites. And how much of our news media is based on sound bites? Well, the president said this today. Well, he probably said a whole lot more than that, right? But they and in different media choose different sound bites to back up their perspective. And what you're doing is saying, no sound bites, you get the entire thing because here's the link to the PDF or something like that, right? So it's sound
Mhm.
bite free news so that you
It's
can
the
make
opposite
informed.
of headline. It's the opposite of headlines. Like there's so much of this headlining of like, and that's where I think it's one of the biggest sins of the news media industry today is the headlines are uninformative. They are meant to get you to click in, but
Yeah,
they're not meant to give you the juice. They don't give you the
right.
meat. They don't give you the content because if they do, you won't click in and they won't get paid and their advertisers won't get paid. Their sponsors, their shareholders, their management, their employees, and their advertisers, their platforms won't get paid. And I'm saying that's okay
Yeah,
because you shouldn't get paid like that. You should get paid for informing and stepping back
yeah,
instead of clickbaiting and keeping someone hostage. So, in some ways, because we text, everything is a length of a text, you get the length of a headline but the content of the entire issue. Because we don't just read one article, we read every single article on the topic, right? If
mm-hmm.
there's 100 articles, we're reading 100 articles. If there's
Wow,
1,000 articles, that doesn't happen very often, we'll read 1,000 articles to
right.
figure out what the common fact base is, what is going on, and what's being said. And this is only something we do in the absence of primary sources. Because if there's a primary source,
Yeah,
forget forget reading the commentators. We
right.
have the horse's mouth. We got the horse right here.
Yeah, absolutely. So how does it work? I mean, so you're not making money on advertising because you're delivering the news. So unpack for my audience, and then we're going to tell them where to go to find all of this.
Sure.
What's the model? What's the business model? Or are you just super generous and a nonprofit, and you're just doing this out of the kindness of your heart? How does it all work?
The more I do this and the more I talk to our users and they
Yeah,
say like this is really a public service project
yeah,
that's like, hidden. It's masked as a company, but it's really a public service project.
that's awesome.
And I feel like in some ways we're kind of picking up the baton of NPR and
Yeah,
PBS that's being
yeah,
defunded and robbed from American people.
that's awesome.
We're giving folks the ability to be informed without being influenced in an environment that is completely privatized the news industry, right? There's
Yeah,
no more public radio. There's no more public broadcasting services. So we do take our revenue from the user. That's the only way that we can serve the user,
yeah,
because who you take revenue from is who you optimize for.
yeah,
And the problem with the news industry, as I've kind of voiced already, is because they take the revenue from the advertiser, that's why they serve the advertiser.
that's right.
For us, we're only willing to serve the reader. That's our whole innovation. I said a lot of details around how and what and why, but our main innovation is putting the reader first in
Yeah,
the way that no media company today does. We're putting the reader first and we're honoring her and her attention.
that's
And
awesome.
because of that, we have to take the revenue from them.
Right,
Because if they don't want to pay us, then we shouldn't exist. It's
right.
not fair. It's not right for us to exist. But the reason I call it a public service project is because we're extremely cheap. We're meant to be affordable for the CEO, Michael, and for the everyday Michael, for the waiter, and for the head of the restaurant.
That's awesome. I love it. I love what you just said there. Be informed without being influenced. I think that summarizes really, Kira, what you have put together with informed uh, dot now and how it all functions and things. So let's do this. I mean, I think you and I could probably talk for a long time on this because this is super intriguing. And I love the connection back to NPR and everything to delivering the news to the consumer, to the person, right? And so, how does my audience, how do they find out more about you, about informed? What would be their next step to say, okay, this is really intriguing, interesting. How do they, where do they go?
Totally. I mean, I would encourage anyone to make an informed decision. And before you sign up, read more about what we're doing, how we're doing it. Check out our website. Our brand name, which is informed.now, is also our website. So that's actually our domain. And if you go to informed.now, you'll get a bit of more of a preview, although it's very minimalist on purpose because it shows and channels our minimalism. You'll get to learn more of what it looks like. And right away there, you can just click to sign up. It's free to try for anybody. We're not looking to trap people. There are no annual commitments. It's all monthly. And it's just a couple of bucks a month, to make it really accessible. A lot of our readers, when they sign up, they cancel any other subscription they've had. They're like, wow, this is news. And everything I've had before this was noise. And that's our brand. That's what we stand for. And we build that trust with the reader with every single text, every single day. And so go to inform.now if you're a media minimalist, if you're a news mindful person, and would love to join hands.
That is awesome. Okay, informed.now. I'm going to have that in the show notes to make sure people can get there. And I love you got all these fun little phrases, minimalist, news minimalist, and all that. I'm like, that is so good because you've done a lot of thinking, and I think that's really what you're encouraging the American public and your audience to do is think on your own. Don't be influenced with the news you receive. Be informed, and you can start today at informed.now. Kira, man, thank you. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for creating informed.now and bringing another vehicle for news delivery, well, dare I say, right to the palm of your hand through text and making it affordable. And thank you for being my guest today on Expert Speak.
Michael, it's been delightful being here. Americans deserve the right to make up their own mind at a time where independent thinking is needed most. And I'm so grateful for you having me on, having this conversation with me. Thank you.
You are so welcome. I appreciate it. And everybody else, thank you for listening to Expert Speak. I appreciate that. Tune in again next week for another great episode. Take care. God bless.